Thank you all for coming. Welcome to the 92nd Street Y. I'm so happy to have this broad range of panelists for this really exciting book, the jewelry book. And I had a couple questions just to start us off. What was the inspiration for this book, obviously, other than jewelry? Was there a moment where you thought, this has to happen?
I think as an obsessive jewelry book collector, when you begin your jewelry journey, sometimes you can't afford jewelry, so you start with books. And I remember when I started becoming obsessed with jewelry, I would sort of cut things out of magazines and sort of like put them on myself because I couldn't afford the actual jewelry.
Did you laminate them at all, or was they just...
No, but sometimes I just sort of went out with them. And people did give me odd looks. But that was my way of sort of thinking, well, I'm going to wear something this good one day.
It's like paper dolls, but...
Kind of,
yeah.
With jewelry. And so books have always been, for me, a way in, a democratic, affordable way into jewelry. And so for this book, I wanted to represent a wide array of styles, eras, types of jewelry. I wanted to have like the world and the history of the world in one place. So I think it's an eclectic mix. And I love lots of different types of jewelry. And I always found in my collection of books, it's always one type of jewelry. You know, it's rings, it's Art Deco. It's rare to get a book where everything's together. So I think that was kind of the idea.
Well, it's amazing to see all this work together. I've never seen Fritz Meyerhofer and Queen Victoria in a book together yeah. about jewelry. So that was one of the reasons I was so intrigued about this incredible tome. How were the artists chosen? Was there a committee?
Yeah, so we had a long list of about 500. Mm-hmm. And then we had an advisory panel of 17 people, mostly sort of curators, gallerists, historians, who, you know, would go through the list and sort of say things they could live with, things you absolutely can't have, and it would go back and forth for some time. So we eventually got it down to the 300 we've got in. And it was fascinating to see who chose who, because it wasn't always an obvious thing. And there were some undeniable people, but then sometimes, you know, the queens were quite a vigorous debate.
Which ones?
Which ones go in, which ones go out.
Right.
And so, yeah, it was a really interesting combination of people. And then obviously we also had 27 writers in the book as well. So we had a vast village creating this book, I have to say.
Definitely. Now I'm going to attempt to... Yeah, I did it. I just threw the slide up and it's in front of us. I think the book is so broad and it covers so much that in our first conversation, the four of us, we were trying to figure out how we're going to talk about all this work, because it's 200 years and it's so many personalities and so many styles. So we have decided, we've chosen our favorite spreads because it's alphabetical, the book. So I found it so interesting, the two people ended up on the page together. And I thought one of the ways to dissect the book would be to choose those spreads and talk about them. But I chose this a smash-up of my own, of two snakes, of Watarsi and Wallace Chan, just to talk about kind of the range of jewelry that is in this book. And obviously that's not antique jewelry, but it's Greek revival, so we're talking 1840, 1850, and then Wallace Chan is more recent. And I just thought for bookends, for stylistic bookends, it would be interesting to look at that. But also Watarski was paired with Lorraine West in the book, and that was also kind of an amazing pairing. Yes, cheers, Lorraine, if you're here. But I wanted to start on our first pair. And Melanie, this was your choice of Grace Jones and Fernando Jorge, two of all of our favorite people. I think we've agreed.
I mean, if you could just have a Grace and Fernando sandwich somewhere on a desert island.
I think that's illegal in most countries,
I would be so there
frankly.
in the middle. I would be the cheese in the middle of that sandwich. I mean, so fascinatingly, I interviewed Fernando recently. For anyone who doesn't know, he's a contemporary Brazilian designer. And he said, you know, one of my all-time bucket list people would be Grace Jones. And I said, funny you should say that, Fernando, because in the book you haven't seen yet, you're next to Grace Jones. And he kind of gasped. But if I go to Grace for a minute, I mean, she's, I think, a hero to so many people. You know, she was born in Jamaica. She came from a very religious family. And she would say that, you know, there were beatings in the Bible most days. And so she had to sort of make herself smaller to survive that. And when she grew up, she was this wild woman who was just going to do whatever she wanted. And I think that was in direct correlation to the fact in her childhood it was very strict. We've all had the friend who comes from a very strict background and then goes absolutely mad, you know, when you get to school, you know, they're changing in the toilets and they're like, so I think that was Grace. And I love what she did. You know, she was a neo-cubist in the sense that she was very deeply into the art world. She was very good friends with Andy Warhol, and they collaborated together. And she collaborated with a number of artists. And she was also at the forefront of the gender fluidity movement. You know, she was very androgynous, but she was also very feminine, but very sort of embraced her masculine side. And I love that about her. And so in terms of jewelry, she wore quite a lot of jewelry from a designer called Maripol. And he created these rubber bracelets for her, partly because he wanted to make jewelry that people who loved her could afford to buy. So in a sense, it was his way of cutting things out and letting people actually wear them.
So did they predate the Madonna rubber?
Absolutely. Yeah. So I love the fact that she really embraced that. She also kind of used her body as a canvas. And, you know, she was so unapologetic. One of my favorite quotes for Grace was that, and I've written it down so small I can't actually read it. You have to be a high-flying bitch sometimes. And I think we should all embrace that concept.
You'll bleep that out, right? Because we don't say those now.
Oh, sorry.
I'm just kidding.
And she also said, I'm a prisoner to vanity. And I think we all are in some way, but she understood that she was. So I love Grace, and it feels like she's always timeless. She never dates. And then Fernando, on the flip side, is one of the nicest guys I know.
Agreed.
In jewelry.
Yeah.
He's a beautiful person, inside and out. And for me, when I first met him, I thought, you don't have to be mad, cruel, or dangerous to be a great designer. You can be just a really nice guy and still be a great designer. And I've always felt that his work is so consistently good. From the time I first started looking at his work, there's never anything that I don't like, and that's hard to do. And especially as he's grown commercially, that's very hard to do. So I went to Côte d'Ivoire with Fernando a couple of years ago, and we had a great time.
Did you?
Yes.
Well, how did that happen? Was that a date or like?
We went to go and see an SMO gold mine, and we had a brilliant time. He's great on the road as well. I'm like, you're just perfect.
He's a lovely guy.
Are you ever having a day off where you're like a bit narky and someone says, shut up, Fernando? No. He is always like, his hair always looks good. He's always in a good mood. He's always giving you the best seat. Like, he's like perfect.
I hope you're listening, Fernando. You're getting good PR here.
It really is. I mean, sometimes I just wanted to mess him up a bit, just to kind of... And so these two go very well together, because, like, she's so wild and he's so good, but they somehow come together in a really nice way. And I think, you know, two of them coming round to our house for a dinner party, we would have some fun.
I want to go to that dinner party.
You're invited.
But it's like so fascinating to me, these pairings that happen.
Yeah.
And where they match and where they don't match, or where they complement each other. Did Fernando have anything to say about Grace, or did he say that, you know, she was an icon?
Yeah, no, he said she was one of the people he most wanted to meet and most wanted to wear his jewelry. And then ironically, they come together in the book. And he said this to me about 6 months before the book came out. So it was bizarre.
That's kismet, I guess.
I think so.
Fate, whatever.
Manifested it. He manifested.
He manifested for sure.
I saw Grace Jones a long time ago when she was on that, and maybe you guys did on the she came out on stage and she was in the parachute dress.
Yeah.
So she was at the top of this dress made out of a parachute, and then slowly descended down, and she just like walked out. It was
I mean, she's still out there performing, you know.
Yeah.
She's.
I saw her a few years ago, before the pandemic.
And I just love how, you know, she just does whatever she wants.
She's Grace Jones.
Yeah.
Yeah. Our next pairing is Alexander Calder and Maria Callas. And Matthew, that was your choice.
Yeah, I could keep talking about Grace. But,
I know, I'm sure you have a Grace Jones story back over there.
Oh, there's so many Grace stories. But the Maripol bracelets, I mean, fabulous. Some of you might have seen the exhibition I did last year called Solid Gold, and I had a display case of Calder necklaces in the show, and it was interesting because he didn't work in gold very often, and there are beautiful letters that he would write to people about, I'd like to make this one in gold, and they always looked like they were radiating out like the sun. And of course, Calder designed or invented the mobile. And so whenever you think about his designing jewelry, you know, or earrings, you know, it's really about something that's kind of floating around you, and gives that kind of spark and magic. You know, here we see Angelica Houston in it. And, you know, then we have Maria Callas, who is known for being a great client of Van Cleef and Arpels. She had a very beautiful jewelry collection that was auctioned off after she passed away. And she's just has kind of this Greek mythology. You know, maybe you think about Loulou or something.
Well, we were just there, so yeah, it's very much on my mind.
Yeah. So, you know, how these two came together, you know, Calder, an artist, and then someone who's a vocalist. And I think we have to think a bit about music as jewelry. You know, there's a lot of jewelry that makes sound as you walk with it. You think about people that wear an ankle bracelet, for example. I remember I had an assistant once who used to wear ankle bracelets, so I always knew if she was coming down the hall. And it's kind of wonderful when jewelry has another aspect to it, you know, that it can be both adornment but also music.
Well, a couple things. One, have you been to the new Calder Museum in Philadelphia?
Oh, not yet.
Okay.
Yeah.
I've never thought of Calder. I never made that connection between movement and jewelry and a mobile, but it seems very profound and should have made that connection before. And two of our friends from Greece are actually here tonight, and Yannis makes recreated classical jewelry, and Eleni, and both of them do Greek dances, and while we were at the Benaki Museum, they wore this traditional Greek jewelry, and as they did the dance, it made this rhythm because it made the sound. So it was quite extraordinary just to tie back La Lunas and sound and jewelry. It definitely is important. Next, and I don't know, do you think Calder and Callas would have met each other? They're kind of contemporaries. They could have run into each other at a party in New York.
Yeah, let's say they did. Yeah.
Okay.
We've decided they did. And also, I love this necklace because it's called The Jealous Husband, this necklace. And it's a really, obviously one of his most iconic necklaces. But I just love how, you know, he had humor as well in there.
Was it made for someone? I don't know who the jealous husband might have been, but he did do a lot of personal work for people, so there's probably a story.
For clients, for his wife. And his first necklaces were made for his sister's dolls. So, you know.
I did make pierced ears for my sister's Barbies. You know those sewing pins with the dots on it? If you stick them in, they're like these cute little ball earrings. And they had shaved heads, too, so. Of course.
Very punk.
I'm the only brother. And Tanya, this was your choice, which is Albion Art and Madeleine Albright.
Right.
Two classics.
Two classics. I love this pairing because I think it, you know, it's kind of looking at collecting in two different ways and two different approaches. And I'm not sure how many of you all are familiar with Albion art, but it's kind of a Japan-based, there is a retail component and kind of a private collection component. And so it's really, this former Buddhist monk began just collecting jewelry and wanted to assemble the very best of the best in kind of historic and antique pieces. And so there's there's Fabergé tiaras and Renaissance carved gems. And so obviously there's really, beautiful stones, but there's a lot of emphasis on like historic craftsmanship, ultra fine granulation that you can only see under a microscope. And but it's really kind of known the world over, and it's kind of a pilgrimage for a lot of people. And the experience, I have not had the pleasure of going yet. It's my kind of bucket list item, but there's a tea ceremony when you visit. It's really thinking about jewelry as I think like a connection to the sublime. It's not necessarily just about ornament. It's not about value. It's really, I think he comes at it from a very spiritual bent. So, I love that approach, and it kind of reconfigures how I think about jewelry in a lot of ways. And whereas Madame Albright, she obviously embraced the brooch. She has inspired me in this tonight. But a lot of her pieces weren't even, necessarily valuable. She couldn't accept valuable things, I think, when she was working for the government, because you had to be, no more than $250, or the government had to keep it just because of, to be unbiased and unbossed. But she used it in her jewelry in like a diplomatic. You really kind of amassed things that spoke for her, non-verbally. I know it's a funny story that, when she was at the UN, one of the Saddam Hussein's, I think, poet laureate called her an unrepentant snake or something like that. So when she was in a meeting, she made sure to break out her serpent pin for that occasion at the UN. I love that there are these different levels on which the jewelry operates, whether it's these ultra precious things or that are really kind of thought of as almost a spiritual element for some people, and it can be, but also just fun and not precious and sentimental, and just something that communicates in a different sort of way, kind of playful way. So I love them together.
I feel like in popular culture, she has made one of the most interesting stories for us as jewelers or lovers of jewelry. She had such a high profile, and she hit across so many levels. It wasn't just fashion; it was politics, and she was the Secretary of State, and she had so many important roles. And the way she used her jewelry, more than many people that I can think about of the past 20 years, she really put it there.
I mean, she was interesting because she was from Czechoslovakia. She was an immigrant. She worked her way up. I think it was the first woman in that role. Mm-hmm. She was a very, very forceful person, and most politicians, were restricted to like a pearl something. And she had a 200-strong collection of brooches, and she used them as a tool of communication. And she also allowed other politicians to wear interesting jewelry. It's rare, but it happens partly because of her. So she opened the door to women wearing things which weren't just sort of quite boring, sort of forgettable, cursory kind of things. And I love the Saddam Hussein reference because, there was a battle. She was in these meetings where they were battling it out.
Well, sometimes you have to be a bad bitch.
Absolutely. Grace would have been totally in there saying,
absolutely,
do what you need to do, Madeleine.
But also in kind of that corporate environment, that power suit thing, to take jewelry and put it there and have it not just be a string of pearls or something kind of corporate looking, but with a message that whether it's the snake or the wasp, because I know there's a famous wasp piece.
And let's shout out Melanie's snake.
Oh.
What a beautiful bracelet.
Yeah, I do. I'm kind of wearing a snake because we've got quite a lot of snakes in this set of things we're talking about, and I feel that we need to all wear more snakes generally.
They're good luck.
Yeah.
This was my choice, and I'm so happy about these two being paired together because I did not know much about either of these artists, and you're going to have to forgive me a little bit because I did pull some information from the book. So it's Richard Chavez, who's a Native American jeweler. He studied as an architectural draftsman, and which is not uncommon for architects to be also jewelers because it's so constructivist. But I thought it was fascinating that he was inspired by the Bauhaus, making works, and he still works on his native pueblo in San Felipe, New Mexico. And he's also trained his son to be a jeweler. So I loved the history of this Bauhaus modernist aesthetic in the Southwest, and to have a Native American jeweler in the book I thought was terrific. And Winifred Mason, I was completely floored. I didn't know anything about her. I don't know if you guys have ever heard about her, so I love this book for this. But she was born in Brooklyn, and she was considered the first Black commercial jeweler in the United States. She received her BS in literature in 1934 and went on to receive an MA in education at NYU. And in 1936 and the early 40s, she taught youth metalsmithing skills at Junior Achievement, where she met Art Smith, who becomes another very famous African-American jeweler, and becomes her assistant. She, after graduating, she began a career as a teacher and worked for a while for the WPA and later as a crafts instructor at the Harlem Boys Club. And the WPA had a really important role in jewelry in America because it actually fostered many education programs, including at the 92nd Street Y. The Jewelry Center here and a lot of our arts programs were part of the WPA program. She received a grant from the Rosenwald Fund to gather folk material and basic patterns used by West Indians. And this research included time in Haiti, where she met her husband, Jean Genet. Her first piece of jewelry appeared in 1940. It was a pendant in bronze and copper and silver. And she went on to become one of the most popular contemporary jewelers, having work at numerous department stores on Fifth Avenue. And she maintained a studio in Greenwich Village in the 1940s. And from this studio, she sold at department stores like Lord & Taylor. Much of the jewelry is custom made, and the clientele included people like Billie Holiday. She had 10 exhibitions of her jewelry, including one women shows in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and Port-au-Prince. And as I said, one of her employees was Art Smith, who went on to found his own studio to become one of the first also significant African-American jewelers. So I loved both of these Americans together, and I loved not ever knowing about Winifred and her work, and the fact that she also influenced like a whole series of jewelers ultimately through Art Smith and the village scene. And there's a kind of a thread of modernism in some of the choices that I took, because it was not only of the time, but because of the WPA and the GI Bill, there was so much funding there for education, and it was also the modernist era, so of course that was what we were teaching, because it was that was the aesthetic, but also modernist jewelry, which is spare and doesn't have a lot of adornment, is also an accessible aesthetic for someone who's working on their own independently in their jewelry studio, because particularly in the States, we don't have a tradition of the guild system or that history of fine craftsmanship in the depth that many European countries do. And because we're so new as Americans, this aesthetic had become really pervasive, I think, in contemporary makers. And it's really only with larger studios with multiple people. You know, there's the wax carver, the enamelist, the engraver. So that becomes a different type of jewelry, and we see individual makers, trending towards this much more pared down aesthetic. And it's an interesting conversation for craft, because it really doesn't have a whole lot to say about craft.
I think this was one of the golden eras for American craft in terms of jewelry, the studio movement. Greenwich Village, there was some brilliant, I think Sam Kramer may be coming up later.
It's coming up, yeah.
There were some wonderful things going on, affordable things as well, which is quite key. And I think she was broadly lost in time, because Art Smith very much eclipsed her, but she was his mentor, and without her, there wouldn't have been him. So I think so much of jewellery within jewellery, there are people, we've forgotten them, you know, but they were fundamental to, I suppose, the progression and evolution of jewellery from that point on. So I'm really pleased to acknowledge some people in the book who I feel should have had more credit as time has gone on.
Yeah. I was blown away not knowing anything about her.
Yeah.
I learned about her through your Sotheby's exhibition.
Oh, good, yes.
So you're responsible for really spreading the gospel about her work. But is there much around still?
It's very hard to find her work.
Yeah.
There are a couple of dealers in New York who have her pieces, but and I think from that exhibition, I think the MFA Boston bought a piece, which is there now. So I'd love to see her in more museums, but it's quite hard to find things. So if anyone has a large collection of Winifred, tell us, please, and we'd love to see it.
This was your choice, I think. Melanie, we're back to you.
Yes. So
Tell us about this one.
This is an interesting couple of characters. Paulding Farnham, one of my favourite all-time American high jewellers as well, worked for Tiffany for 23 years. Interestingly, you know, there's a lot of privilege in jewellery, as we know, and I think his uncle was the CFO of Tiffany, so he wasn't exactly coming from a completely, you know, first generation. He did have help to get into Tiffany, but he started when he was very young, in his 20s, and he was given this enormous task of creating a 200-strong collection for the French exposition in Paris. They had these grand, obviously, shows where they would show all the craftsmanship. So he created this exhibition, this collection of 200 pieces, at 24 orchids in this selection, and they won the gold prize. And this isn't one of them, but essentially it was the first time an American had gone to France and beaten the French at their own game. And
Well, then Halston did.
of course. And so he was a genius. You know, he took a wide array of inspirations from Navajo jewelry to Japanese. You know, he was very much a geek, you know.
Jewelers tend to be geeky. I mean, there's a lot of
He was
tech
geeky.
involved. Yeah.
And Kuntz also, at Tiffany, would collaborate with him and feed him stones, and he would make all these pieces. So he kind of rose quite quickly in the ranks. And then when Louis Comfort Tiffany kind of came in when his father died, there couldn't be two geniuses in one place. There was a clash of egos, and he left. He was kind of booted out. And he kind of went downhill from there, really. He kind of never really made any more jewellery after he left Tiffany. And he went on these kind of madcap adventures where he was sort of on these gold mining kind of rich quick schemes. He was trying to sort of, and he just never went back to design. Mm-hmm. So to have this 23 years at the top of design and then to never go back to it was fascinating to me. And I think he was a fascinating character. And then one of my favorite jewelry collectors in history is Maria Felix. Phenomenal woman, kind of a bit like in the Grace mold. Mm-hmm. Absolutely wild, did whatever she wanted. She was Mexican. She was spotted when she was in Mexico City. She was the receptionist of a plastic surgeon's office, and she was spotted by a film director. I mean, she was a bombshell. She had 15 siblings, and she had to fight for attention her whole life. One of the things I like about Maria is when she traveled with not less than 40 suitcases. And that is a woman after my own heart.
Did she have a mule train carrying them? Like,
literally, she had an entourage of people just carrying these suitcases. She did nothing in small doses.
And she was an actress, correct?
She was an actress. She did 47 films. Hollywood constantly called her to say, come and do this film, but they always tried to cast her as a Native American. Because in those days, you had the brown other, and she said, absolutely not. I'm not going to learn English. She actually went off and learned sort of French and Italian and did French and Italian films as a kind of fuck you to Hollywood. Sorry, everyone else. And just wouldn't do them. And that's what you were supposed to want. So she was very much her own woman. She was married 4 times. She took a huge amount of lovers. She was bisexual. At one point, Frida Kahlo and Diego Rivera both proposed to her in writing when they were married to each other.
Well, it definitely doubles your odds if you play both ends of the stick, so, you know.
I mean, she just had this way. She would walk in and everyone would just fall in love with her. And so she was just a force. And I love her. So in terms of jewellery, obviously there was the legend that she goes into Cartier with a bowl of crocodiles and says, make me a necklace. As you do. Make me this Cartier. Here you go. And they did. And then with this snake, there's like 3,000 diamonds in this snake. It's an articulated snake. It was just in the V&A exhibition in London. And so she had a big thing for snakes and reptiles. And she collected them her whole life. And she sold a lot of her pieces back to Cartier. So she was just, you know, the kind of woman, again, that needs to come round to my house and have this dinner party we've been talking about. So these two together are fascinating. They were both very different eras, very different personalities, but in their own way, they did things that no one really could stop. Paul Ding-Farner was much more sort of poetic and a sort of geeky genius, but she also broke all the molds. You know, she just did whatever she wanted. At one point, I think, you know, she was a dangerous woman to come round because she just seduced everyone. And, you know, no men were safe in her presence. And I'm sure afterwards they got to carry all the suitcases.
She was like a diamond crocodile.
Basically, yes.
Right?
Yeah.
She reminds me of like the golden age of actresses who used to buy their jewelry, and you know, I think she's kind of the best example of that, or like one of the height of that.
But the Liz Taylor, you know, they just said, you know, if you want whatever I'm doing, I'm more bigger. Yeah. No small. I didn't ever see her in a small piece of jewelry.
And they bought their things and they wore them over and over again. It wasn't just one runway, one red carpet appearance and done. It was.
I mean, who stands there with their priceless snake sort of draped over their head in the desert? You know, like she does.
She had an audience.
Yes, always had an audience.
This is a great pairing. This is.
Liberace. Well, you know, when I was going through Melanie's book, which everyone should buy a copy of, it was amazing to come upon Liberace. And my first remembrance was as a, you know, being young and watching TV, and we had, you know, Mike Douglas show and Dinah Shore. Mm-hmm. And frequently, Liberace would be on, and he would tell the stories of his rings. You know, I got this ring because I had performed at this hotel in Las Vegas, and this is my piano ring, and if I click it, it flips up. And, you know, it was just so fascinating about that. And after I saw this, I went back to YouTube to try and find one of those episodes that I saw. But what I ended up finding was this interview where Liberace was the guest co-host on Mike Douglas, and they brought out Little Richard. And oh my God.
It's a wonder the TV didn't explode.
It was beyond. It was so great. But it reminded me of also seeing Little Richard and how I saw him tell a story once where he said he was on a boat. He had all these rings, and how he just had given up on everything, and he just started throwing the rings one at a time out into the ocean, you know? So there's something about, I don't know, musicians and rings, and, you know, of course, you're always playing an instrument. So, of course, and Liberace had famously said he plays very well, you know, with all those rings on. So that was my main interest in this spread. Roy Lichtenstein, you know, there's such a long tradition of artists transforming their work into something miniature. And so I think it's always, you know, it's wonderful to see, you know, like those wonderful Dali pieces, Lichtenstein, and just so many more. But it was really about Liberace. And
So Tanya, this is your spread.
Yes. I just, between Judy, Geib, and Gem Palace, I think it's kind of the world of color and splendor and two different kind of expressions. I mean, Judy obviously she's based in New York. She kind of transitioned to jewelry after kind of working in graphic design and other things, but and is largely self-taught. So she does, you know, fabulous colors, spectacular emeralds, and these.
Have you been to Judy's studio?
Everyone tells me, Judy, we're going to make a date. We've been talking
I'll
about it for a long time.
I'll take you there because
Can I come?
You can come.
Oh, great.
Well, I hope you can. Judy, if you're out there, I hope you can.
Yeah, Judy, we're coming. But
Emeralds on the table.
I know, that's what everyone says. It's like Aladdin's cave, it's emeralds, it's everything all over the place. And she is, like Fernando, the world's nicest person, and you know, bikes around the city to her studio, and is like the world's coolest art professor, and like carries her lunch in like a diamond-studded container that she made herself. So she is just a really special, interesting, fabulous character. But by the same token, she makes these incredible pieces. I mean, she does a range from sterling silver things that are a couple $100, but also, you know, a $100,000 emerald collar. But still, it feels like something you could still wear with jeans and a t-shirt. Like, it's, as far as that goes. So there is kind of like this kind of boho, fabulous way about her work. Whereas I feel like Gem Palace, it's the splendor of the Maharajas, you know, and I think it's family operated for like 10 generations or something incredible like that. And obviously with like reams upon reams of pearls and jawbreaker-sized diamonds and the whole kind of spectacle that you would expect of royal jewelry. By the same token, you can still go there as a tourist and get something too. So I kind of like that high-low feeling that comes from that both of them also represent. But I love the color and the fabulousness of both of their worlds. But they're done in such diametrically opposed ways.
I want to put that Judy's brooch on his turban. I think it would look great.
Yeah, there is something that feels like their aesthetics kind of intersect.
It's Judy, a Maharaja would wear Judy's work to the supermarket.
Yeah.
And look great.
I love her dendritic agates.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And I think she does that better than anyone else in contemporary jewellery at the moment.
Well, I love Scottish Victorian jewelry and that dendritic agates. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, but like agates and opals are phenomenal. The emeralds, so she kind of has this really spectacular palette, but it feels accessible. It doesn't feel scary. It's not intimidating.
No, it's I don't want to say whimsy, but it does have a bit of whimsy to it. It has a lightness to it. It does feel really accessible.
Yeah.
Maybe as opposed to the Maharaja's, 12 karat turban piece, which I'd be okay with.
I would access that if I could. So yeah.
This was my choice. Again, back to this kind of modernist aesthetic and single makers. I have to flip back to my notes. This is Dorothy Hogue and Nevin Holmes, and Dorothy Hogue is on the left. She was the daughter of a jeweler, which I love hearing people who are in the family of jewelers, because that's one of the only ways to get into jewelry is if you have a family or you go to school and you find it. She influenced many, many people as the head of the jewelry department in Edinburgh, the jewelry department in the University of Edinburgh, which has a really great collection of contemporary jewelry. She led that program since 1985 to 2007, and she taught generations of artists, including Giovanni Corvaja, who's in this book. So I loved the kind of generational idea. And Nevin Holmes found jewelry later in life. She went to Central St. Martin's, and both of their work have this modernist / Holmes has this kind of a surrealist influence, and we see again and again this thread of surrealist jewelry in 20th century work, which I also find kind of fascinating. But I love the fact that they were both very spare. They're sheet-based, more or less. Nevin Holmes has very plain gems. You know, they're cabochons, and the same thing on Dorothy Hogue's work. It's cabochons on the end. I think they're cabochons, or they're velvet. I can't remember, on the end of that necklace, which is beautiful and spare and articulated. But I thought they were just really interesting single makers on this page. A lot of the pairings as we went through the book, there can be some jarring ones, like a single maker and then like a really famous house. And I really liked the fact that the other two that I had chosen, that these were two makers that made things on their own in their studios and had a real sense of longevity. They're both in Goldsmiths Hall in London, so.
Yeah, I mean, I went to see the collection a couple of years ago, and Dora, who looks after the collection, got all these pieces out, and I kept seeing a couple of rings that just really called to me. And I asked her about the rings, and she was like, oh, that's somebody called Nevin Holmes. I'd never heard of Nevin Holmes. And so I went off and tried to do some investigation. There was really hardly anything about her. And then I posted one of the rings on Instagram, and her niece got in touch with me and said, you know, I'm also a jeweler. She was my aunt, and you know, would you like to meet up? So we both went back into Goldsmiths with some original sketches and things that the niece had. She gifted them to the archive, and we had this conversation about Nevin. And she again was a fascinating character, quite wild. You know, she
lived in Italy. She married a war correspondent, or?
Well, actually, he was an arms dealer. I'm not sure we're allowed to say that. I couldn't put that in the book. But she was a wild
war
one.
Correspondent.
And she was married to various people and had lots of adventures. I think she was a painter at one point, and she was a translator, and she lived in various parts of Europe. She ended up coming back to London. She was Turkish originally. She was, again, living this life of kind of bohemia at a time where women, you know, were told not to do these things. And she made a series of beautifully modernist pieces. If anyone gets a chance to go and see them at the Goldsmiths Company, please do. They're fantastic. So again, going back to this acknowledging of really quite serious designers who in history were sort of skipped past, partly because they were women sometimes, and partly because they were sort of lost in sort of obscurity. They had a hot moment, and then they sort of became less able, you know, and there's really nothing of her. So I really wanted to pay my respects to her talent.
I love it. I had not known about Nevin Holmes either. I heard about Dorothy Hogue because of her relationship to academia. But
Yeah.
It seems like there's a book out there of undiscovered jewelers or
Absolutely.
jewelry influencers before.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, it's me again.
This is you again.
Got a 5 minutes. So Lalique and Lalaine. I mean, again, quite interesting characters. Obviously, Claude Lalaine was, I mean, she designed for Montebello, which was interesting. She was famous for her electroplating, body parts, things from nature. She would go onto the garden and get a twig and electroplate it. She was a French surrealist and worked alongside her husband. She was obsessed with body parts. She would cast people's mouths who came round for dinner, and her friends and neighbours, and just sort of like, you know, sort of, she loved mouths and fingers.
Yes, it was before dinner. She gave them dinner afterwards after she let them cast their mouth. Like, I'll give you dinner if you let me cast your mouth.
If you just give me your lips, yes. Her father was a gold broker, which a lot of people don't know.
That's helpful as a jeweler.
Yes. And she said something which really resonated with me. She said, artists and artisans are the same thing. And I like that because too many times, you know, jewelry is separated from art as a decorative thing. But she was saying they're the same. We are the same. So I like that about her. Then Lalique, obviously, you know, is a genius, was a genius. kind of straddled the Art Deco and Art Nouveau movements very successfully with these strange biomorphic designs, often sort of based on sort of the female form, and then sort of adding other elements from nature. Quite a strange person.
Well, also, very, like the female as dangerous. There's a whole, I don't know if
Yes.
you've heard Benjamin Macklow's lecture on women in Art Nouveau jewelry, but it's quite astounding how provocative and frightening it was.
Yeah.
Power of women in jewelry. He was making a statement.
Yeah, he was actually quite radical, I think. He actually left jewellery to go and work in glass because he was so mercilessly copied that he got fed up with it. And he said, I'm walking away from it. And again, we don't really talk about that, you know, like it kind of really destroyed some of his desire to continue in jewellery. So he was...
Glad it's not on the internet now. I mean, put that on Instagram.
I mean,
be copied in a second, right?
It's crazy, even then, you know.
Yeah.
And that really sort of takes people's energy away if, you know. So, and then obviously he went into the glass sphere, and his opalescent glass was magnificent. He worked on all these kind of finishes, sandblasting and textured glass, which hadn't really been done before. So I would say he was a genius. He also worked at Cartier and Boucheron. And he really challenged our idea of what precious was. You know, he used a lot of non-precious materials at the time, horn and, you know, things which were considered to be nonsense for high jewellery. And Sarah Bernhardt was one of his biggest mentors and collectors, and I like this relationship they had. So for these two, again, I love the sort of the surrealism here and the body parts. But I also think they were quite radical in that they did what they wanted to do for a time and then they moved on to other things. And I think a lot of the time if you do something successful, everyone says just do it forever. But you're successful because you do what you're not supposed to do. And then when you've had enough of that, you go and do something else. And I think you can't be held prisoner by your success.
It's hard to become iconic and stay iconic because then you'd become boring because you're iconic because it's so special.
Yeah, you can't
And then
care about it. To become it, you can't care about it, which means you can move on from it.
Well, again, there's this great surrealist thread going through here.
Yes.
All right. So I met Gabby Elon while I was also working on the Solid Gold show. And in our permanent collection at the Brooklyn Museum, we have these beautiful pre-Columbian masks, which have smiles in them and the gold teeth. So I love the idea of having these ancient gold masks with gold teeth mixed with contemporary gold teeth or grills. And I ended up going on a long rabbit hole about gold and dentures. And gold has been used for millennia because it was biocompatible. You could make, attached teeth, and it's a little grisly. So I won't go into it too much. But gold wires and things were used for dentistry for a long time. And it's interesting when you look at the history of the 20th century, at the time when people stopped choosing to have gold teeth because porcelain had improved so much, rappers started wanting to have gold teeth more as a decorative element. And it was interesting to learn things about, like, if you have a full row of gold on top and bottom, they call that a wall-to-wall. And so there's a lot of areas where you can have jewelry that you might not have originally thought of, but I think it's definitely a moment of our period of time where dental jewelry is popular.
I was in Paris last week, and Valerie Demure had a salon show, and I did get a diamond stuck to my tooth. Like, they glued it on.
Oh.
She had, so you can wear jewelry on your teeth.
Are you going to carry on with that, Jonathan?
I don't think so. It came off after.
Oh.
It finally came off. I don't know if some people here might have seen it. I was ashamed and proud of it at the same time. But it was Valerie, and there was champagne, and we had to do it. My two girlfriends were in Paris, were there. They did it. Anyway.
Oh, no, I
And I have a lot of gold teeth, so.
Oh, see,
Lots.
gold.
Yeah, you do.
I do, I know.
Oh,
It's a story.
it's great. I remember I was having a cap done, and I asked my dentist, I said, well, can I have a porcelain one and a gold one? And he looked at me and went, no. So
It wears, I was told it wears very well. Gold wears like porcelain. I mean, like enamel. But
yes.
Yeah.
No,
Appropriate for the
Yeah,
for
just
the
happened.
gig, you know.
it depends on what carat gold you're having your teeth made in.
Yes.
So,
I'm a
but-
grinder, so it's definitely below 10 carat.
Yeah, but let's have
Otherwise, it wouldn't be there anymore.
And then we have also these people, Pradap Gakwad and Sita Devi, who had this extraordinary collection of pearls and gems. And when they had to leave India, we were talking about 40 cases for Maria Felix, they took 40 cases of jewels out of the country. So there's
How
wonderful...
did India feel about that? Were they like, I guess it's yours, you can take it? It's almost national treasure.
There's a lot of those.
Yeah.
I mean, Taiwan, you know,
Yeah.
where's the peacock throne? You know, all these, there's a lot of stories about things in one country that might belong to another. Yeah. It's a time we're in now where people are repatriating a lot of things. But she would also go to Van Cleef's and have the jewels remade into other settings, which is such a long history, you know, for jewelry.
I think what's interesting about these two is they were both married to each other when they met.
Yeah.
And they saw each other, and he was like, that's the one, and divorced his wife. She divorced her husband, and they had this tumult. They had this affair, and in the middle of all that was the jewellery.
Right.
So I thought that was interesting. It was like a love affair, a deep love affair, but the jewellery was part of it. And of course, you know, she ends up in Paris, but their jewellery was fairly equal. You know, like he had great things, she had great things, and they just kept having great things made. Even when they went bankrupt, they asked for more money from the state, and they made jewellery with it. I love that.
No, I love how a lot of your stories are about jewelry and relationships.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's all about passion and desire. All of it, really.
You know, my thing about stones is the reason why we give precious stones is because they're like eyes.
Yeah.
They reflect and they refract just like an eye, and that's where we connect on the most emotional level. So yeah, why wouldn't we give gems to our loved one or our betrothed? And they're worth a lot of money, so we should collect them too, but you know.
I mean, these two really went for it. They had some fantastic things.
They could get matching grills.
They probably would do if they were still out there.
And Tanya, this is yours.
Winston and Hemmerle. I mean, Harry Winston, we're in New York. It's New York City Jewelry Week. He's like the quintessential American high jewelry name, so I felt like he needed a little shine. You know, Harry Winston is kind of like a New York guy. He came up through, you know, from the bottom. And, you know, his father had a store, but he just had this inherent eye. I think there's a story about him, you know, kind of as a child, maybe like 12 or so, and spotting a little gem from a dealer who thought it was like glass or something semi-precious, and it was actually an emerald. And he sold it for hundreds of dollars in like the beginning of the 20th century. So it was a real find. And so he was really, you know, kind of, you know, a prodigy when it came to gems, and built his own, you know, his own name and own legacy in gems. Obviously, he got the Hope Diamond, and now it's in the Smithsonian thanks to him. And he, you know, was immortalized in Gentleman Prefers Blonde. So I think, you know, talk to me, Harry Winston. Like, he's just, I think that name is just so important in American high jewelry. And like, even though for insurance purposes, his face could never be pictured, so we don't really know what he looks like. There's a famous picture of him with the handful of gems, and that's kind of what we see of him, or the back of him in his famous office. But so I always kind of think about, he always felt like a showman, even though he was unseen. And so I always wonder, what would it be like today if Harry Winston was around? Would he be like an influencer and, flashing those jewels on his TikTok? But
so classy. I don't know. He'd have to readjust, maybe.
I don't know. Maybe. And I just think juxtaposed with Hemmerle, I don't know. Like Harry Winston, is associated with like the mid-century great jewelry collecting dames. Like Wallace Simpson was a client. Obviously, Elizabeth Taylor got the Taylor Burton diamond from Winston, whereas I think Hemmerle is just kind of like very, like the European cousin. It's very discreet, uses materials like aluminum and steel and things like that that are very unconventional, especially in the high jewelry context. I mean, they started out, they're over a century old, still family owned, based in Munich, and started out as kind of a house of like military medals and regalia. And so, have kind of evolved into what some, the very top tier of high jewelry.
You're also in a very contemporary jewelry town, like Munich. The Academy's there, the Schmuck Festival is there.
Yes.
So I've asked them both about that. Christian's always a little demure about having all that contemporary jewelry around, but their work is incredible.
It's incredible. Yeah. And I think it's just, the stones are exceptional. They're really these giant jawbreaker stones, but in aluminum or steel or copper and things that people, I think are now accepting more in that kind of very high level, but I think they're really kind of at the forefront of doing that kind of work.
Absolutely. I have a funny story. The last time when the Hemmerles were here, Stelline was interviewing them. The president was in town. She was over on the west side. Everything was shut down. Like, she tried to get here, and time was ticking. She finally arrives here almost a half an hour late. I'm starting the interview. And God bless Stelline Volandes, because she couldn't get across the park, and she found one of the Central Park gardener guys with the golf truck, and she's like, "You have to take me across the park." And she did. She drove across Central Park to get here in time for the Hemmerle interview on a golf cart.
Maria Felix would have done that.
There you go.
It's like commandeering Central Park.
Yeah, she made it. This was my pick, and I think really I chose this because they're two artists who made jewelry, and I have a lot to say about artists who make jewelry as a jeweler who makes art. There's not always a two-way street. It's a really interesting, artists can make jewelry and everyone's like, "Oh my God, wow, it's amazing." And then a jeweler makes art and they're like, "Oh,
Yeah.
okay." Trust me. I love both of these people so much. I love Man Ray. He's from Philadelphia. I'm from Philadelphia. He lived in Williamsburg. I've lived in Williamsburg. And of course, Robert Mapplethorpe, incredible work. And I just wanted to put them out there for the discussion of these two artists who ended up on the same spread together, who make jewelry. And not a lot of it. Neither of them made a lot of jewelry. In fact, I think Mapplethorpe's some of the only jewelry that they kind of recreated.
Quite hard to find images of it, because so few pieces.
Yeah. We are getting a little over time, but I wanted to get through some of our last pairings.
Oh,
Speaking of,
Mr. T.
you just love a bling on TV. I think you just, we clocked you. We know your profile now. Liberace, Mr. T. Okay.
Well, I thought we should have some men that wear jewelry, right? So Mr. T is a great story because he was a bouncer at a nightclub, and at the end of every night they used to go and check out the club with the lights on, and he would find jewelry that people just left or it fell off, and that's how he started his signature look.
I love that.
Just from found jewelry, which then he amplified, of course, with his I Pity the Fool and the A-Team. But his look became so much of that period. And, one could say, well, wouldn't it have been interesting to have him next to one of the Maharajas that had a lot of gold chains or something? But those are connections you make while you're going through Melanie's book, which is amazing. You go like, oh, that was that and that was now, and you start making all of these historical connections, even though the book is largely alphabetical. But I loved here also with these beautifully carved pearls. You know, skulls are a thing that come up again and again through, we think about, well, I think about people like Vivienne Westwood, who really began as a jeweler before she became a fashion designer. You just showed the Robert Mapplethorpe necklaces. I think we all think of people like Alexander McQueen, you know, but skulls in jewelry is a long history.
Memento mores and
Yeah, with real skulls and carved ones, but these carved pearls are just beyond.
They are really
beautiful.
beautiful.
So, but it was, you know, again, it was really about Mr. T.
Men with Jewels. That's the next book. And that's a double entendre. These are two, they were on my list, and I'm just going to go through them really quick. I just love this pairing because Fritz Meyerhofer and Bouquet couldn't be farther apart. But I also just like the way the colors looked together. I don't know, I really am so excited that this book is alphabetical because it has forced these pairings, and it forces us to look like, I don't know, does Fritz know that he's in this book? He's got to. And does he know he's next to?
I hope so.
I hope so too. I gotta send. I've been to his studio in Vienna. His wife Margaret Hart and I went to graduate school, believe it or not. But I'm so happy that there's this type of jewelry and that type of jewelry together. And the last one, which was also mine, was Kramer and Kuntz, both New Yorkers, both kind of self-taught, both a little bit eccentric, and couldn't be farther apart in terms of Kuntz going so far up in Tiffany's and Kramer being downtown, although Tiffany did have an outpost on Union Square back in the day. I love the uptown-downtown contrast.
And Kramer also described his jewellery as fantastic jewellery for people who are slightly mad. And that's why I love it.
All you mad people out there.
Yeah.
We probably have time for a question. I don't think we did questions here, but if someone wants to shout one out, I can't see you.
Did you include many Latin American designers?
I would say we've definitely got some. I'm trying to think, racking my brain, my addled brain, of who. I think we've definitely got some. I'll have to come back to you on exactly who, because we've got 300 people.
Fernando Jorge, does he count?
Yes,
I mean, he's Brazilian.
He's Brazilian.
And Silvia Furmanovic is also Brazilian.
That is true.
Brazilian.
So there's a lot of people out there.
Maria Callas was Latin American, although not a jeweler. There you go.
Yeah.
Chavez,
so
yep. And
I'd say-
for the 90 Seconds Rewind, we did have a talk on Latin American jewelry
Yeah.
a couple years ago, so we do represent on this stage.
Yeah, I think it's quite an interesting collection because we did, not everyone's a designer, so we've obviously got a lot of collectors, icons, queens, lots of different types of people. For example, we've got Carmen Busquet, who is a collector from Venezuela originally, and she is a force, again, a phenomenal collector, really supportive of interesting, sort of quite radical designers, especially at the beginning of their journey. So I think there's quite a number of elements and people from Latin America, not all jewelers, but yeah, there's a lot of interesting people in this book. And people who, again, are a bit unexpected, because I don't really see many collectors in books either about jewellery. And they are the fundamental, element we all need to make more jewellery.
Yeah. We have just a few more minutes, but I wanted to ask you all, since this book is about 200 years of jewelry,
Yeah.
do you have a prediction about the next 200 years of jewelry? Apart from the gold price?
That is a harsh
I mean, the last 200 years was the Industrial Revolution, and that changed everything. And that's why we have modernist jewelry. That's why we have, a lot of types of jewelry, because it was an escape from their manufactured jewelry, So, I mean, to me, the last 200 years was that. And in 200 years, I don't know, will we have a presto changeo machine where we just scan it, put it in, and bloop, it comes out?
I don't think so. I don't think that's what we want from jewellery.
I'm saying that's what we want. I'm just giving, like, a prediction of the next 200 years.
I would say it's going to be the antidote to technology.
Okay. I like that.
No, I loved when Melanie was talking at the beginning about cutting out jewelry from magazines and wearing that. And when she was talking about it, she reminded me of the Tiffany exhibition that had been in London, where you could try on the yellow diamond in AI. So I think that is so helpful to be able to visualize yourself wearing this jewelry. And I think once you see yourself in a particular way, it gives you that kind of impulse to, you become very goal-oriented. Not that you're going to have the yellow diamond, but you might have a citrine or something.
Okay, just whether that color is my color.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, exactly.
What, tooth-wise?
Oh, well. I'm going to send you a picture of me.
Okay, send me a picture.
Tanya, do you have a
I do have
thought?
a prediction. I think Melanie's right in that I think jewelry is really the antidote to technology, but I think we're potentially moving into a realm where like AI madness is going to envelop everyone for a while, and it's going to be, and maybe it becomes more integrated into design, I don't know, but I think that the real tactility of gold and gems and stones, I think, is irreplaceable. So, I think that there'll always be a seesawing effect with technology, but I can't see it being displacing the real thing.
Well, thank you all for helping me digest this amazing book. I think we have a couple things on the agenda. I want to have a paper jewelry / paper dolls party.
I think we
dinner
should.
Party. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think there's a book of unsung, particularly women jewelers out there that could be written, and I think we should have our dinner party list of the jewelers we want to have together. Like Grace Jones is still alive, and maybe we can get Fernando and Grace together, and maybe it's a benefit
Could you
or a
imagine them on
fundraiser.
the dance floor together?
No. I don't know. I think she might eat him alive.
Yes.
He's so sweet.
Does she live in England? Is she in the UK? Where is she?
I think she's all over the place.
She's all over the place.
Yeah.
Let's find her.
We'll find her.
All right, everyone. Thank you, and enjoy New York City Jewelry Week. Thank you to the panel.